Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode review and breakdown for Stargirl Season 2. Today we're talking about Episode 8, aka Summer School, Chapter 8. Of course, last week's episode we dealt with Yolanda and her whole storyline, with Brainwave and all that coming to the forefront. Of course, with the episode ending with her actually quitting and leaving her mantle of Wildcat and quitting the JSA. Now, this week's episode, we get to focus more on Rick's story and his relationship with Solomon Grundy, with the spotlight also being put on Beth in this episode, which I really like seeing as well. But anyways, guys, of course, spoiler warning, if you've not yet seen this episode yet, Stargirl Season 2, Episode 8, because we are talking spoilers. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this thing. So, like I said, this is basically Rick's episode where his story comes to the forefront here. So we start off the episode with him really kicking things off with his story, where the teacher that we saw earlier in the season, I think it was actually like the first episode, that accused him of cheating on a test, and then later he redid the test, and she's like, oh, you're actually really smart, you just actually studied. So she shows up at his house to apologize once again, and basically suggests to him that he's like really smart and he should consider going to college. And she was like, oh, I went to college and it was a nice restart for me, so maybe it could be the same thing for you. But then of course his Uncle Matt comes out the door, and he's just as much of a jerk as he was in season 1, so he's making his comeback here, and he sees the paper for college, and he's like, yeah, no, you're gonna go to jail before you go to college. And well, yeah, you see the end of the episode, and I guess he was kind of right. But still, that was so rude. Like, that is not something you say to your nephew, or, well, technically nephew, but basically child, because, he's basically playing the father role in his life. But yeah, that is not something you say to someone. But like I said, it does actually come true at the end. But anyway, Rick is just like feeling so much loneliness now, because basically everybody in this world is against him except that teacher. But even at first, she automatically judged him, and like, he's got the JSA, but they're all busy dealing with the Eclipso stuff. So he goes off into the woods where he meets up with Solomon Grundy. This is something we've seen little hints and teases of throughout the season, that he's been going out in the woods and feeding Solomon Grundy. And it's been really funny a couple times there where he's like ordering like 3, 4, 5, 6 different pizzas, or like bringing like barrels of apples, and it's like just boatloads of food for Solomon Grundy. And like, you'd think somebody would get suspicious. Like, I remember in that episode when he was at the diner with Yolanda, when Yolanda was still working at the diner, and it was like, yeah, give me like 2 dozen cheeseburgers or something like that. And she was like, really? Like, yeah, that's a lot. But he goes out there in the woods and he meets up with Grundy. He gives him a bunch of apples and everything. So then they sit down on this log, and obviously Grundy doesn't talk, at least not in this version of the character. But Rick just starts talking, and I think this is really almost like therapeutic for him, because again, like, even though Grundy doesn't talk back to him, it is good to have somebody to talk to about just whatever you need to talk about this time. And he's talking about how he used to have a dog, which I think is actually pretty funny, because if you think about it, Grundy is almost kind of like a dog. Like, literally all he does is just like eat, sleep, and I don't even know what else, like go to the bathroom probably. But like, yeah, he does a lot of eating, and basically he's kind of a dog in this version. Like, he makes noises, and yeah, so he's basically Rick's pet in a way, but also therapy partner. Again, it's kind of weird, but also kind of cool at the same time. So anyway, he was talking about how he had a dog once, but then his uncle was using it for like fighting and stuff. So then he actually ended up saving the dog, and saying that it escaped and everything, but making sure that it got to a better home. And so, that's a nice story, seeing that, softer side of Rick that I really enjoyed seeing here. And then after this, I love how Grundy actually like hands him an apple. It's like, oh yeah, we can share. I mean, he's got plenty of apples there, might as well. Meanwhile, at the Whitmore-Dugan residence, we have everybody waking up and having breakfast and everything, but then the doorbell rings, so Courtney answers it, but there's nobody there. Instead, there's just a duffel bag just sitting there on their porch. She opens it up, and it is the Wildcat suit. So, like I said, we saw in last episode that Yolanda quit being Wildcat. She quit the JSA, and like, this is for real. Like, she returned the suit and everything, and this just hitting Courtney really hard, because she just feels so much guilt for this. And Yolanda never even shows up in the episode, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. And who knows if she's going to be in next week's episode either. But what I really want to talk about now is Beth, because Beth has such an interesting storyline in this episode. Because, of course, like, you know, it's Rick's episode. That was the big headline. And, like, you're dealing with Rick and Grundy and everything. But Beth had a really interesting subplot in this episode. Because, first, when she starts off the episode, she's once again trying to get in contact with Dr. McNider. Of course, we found out that the real Dr. Charles McNider is indeed alive. He's just trapped in the Shades Shadowland. We're not completely sure where he is, but it's something along those lines. But then we get this scene where Beth's parents sit her down and tell her why they're getting divorced. And basically they say it's her fault. Like, yeah, you know, raising you basically led to us growing apart and all this stuff. It's like, wow, that is not the kind of thing you say. Like, she's already dealing with so much, but then you say it's her fault. That is just wrong. Of course, we see that actually never happened, but still, whoa. So Beth is just going through some really, really tough times here. So that's when, of course, Eclipso is able to take advantage of that. So we see that Beth goes to Courtney's house, and none of them are around, but she meets Bruce Gordon. Of course, Bruce Gordon is the young 10-ish-year-old boy form that Eclipso took on the form of. And so he's there, and he's automatically just calling her a liar and a thief and all this stuff, which, to be fair, I mean, like, his points that he's making are true and are accurate. Like, she did lie about being Courtney's friend. She did steal the goggles in season 1 when she first got them. So, I mean, good points, but, I mean, she's used them for good, so I don't know. And also, Bruce is, like, so racist. This was such a crazy part of it. It obviously was cool for Beth's character to, like, really feel empowered for being black and everything, but like Bruce was just so racist. Like, I mean, Eclipso is the villain, so I suppose it makes sense. Like, if somebody in the show is going to be racist, it should be the villain. But I mean, to see a 10-year-old boy saying that stuff, it was just weird. And he just, like, tortures her through this whole episode. He traps her in, like, this dreamlike state where she's, like, in the JSA HQ with Starman, Wildcat, and Hourman. And it was just, like, pretty crazy. But by the end of this, I do really like how Beth ends up standing up for herself, fighting back, and basically is able to escape this nightmare from Eclipso. So Eclipso basically retreats, and then at the end of the episode, we see Beth wake up and she's in her home. And it's like, whoa, how is she all of a sudden now in her home? Well, Dr. McNider fills her in on what happened because he was watching the whole thing. Turns out that she never left her home. She never went to Courtney's house. She never saw Bruce Gordon there. It was all in her head. But of course, from the doing of Eclipso, and definitely makes me think that this is probably what happened last week with Yolanda as well. Because that was one of the big questions asked in that episode. What was really going on there? Was Brainwave really, truly still alive in a way? And did he transfer his consciousness into Yolanda's mind? Or was it Eclipso? Or was it just Yolanda's mind playing tricks on her because of that traumatic moment? Like, I'm pretty sure it's Eclipso because now he's doing it to the rest of the JSA as well. Now, as for Courtney in this episode, she does actually get to team up with Pat and Rick here to take down Grundy in a way, kind of. And we actually get to see her name the staff, so she named it Cosmo, which I think is pretty interesting. I'm not sure if that's something from the comics, but, you know, Cosmo, that's a cool name. It kind of makes sense for the staff. So Rick calls Courtney and Pat and says Grundy needs our help. So he kind of fills them in a little bit on what happened, how he's been feeding him and everything. And so then they go out into the woods, and they find that a 10-year-old girl is dead. She's found dead, and Grundy, of course, just happens to be standing over the body. So Rick automatically assumes he's the one that killed her. And then he chases after Grundy. Grundy runs off and everything. And then Pat picks up the body of this little girl, and then all of a sudden her eyes open, and then the body disappears. So obviously this is the doing of Eclipso. This is all his manipulation. And then we get this big reveal moment where Rick is fighting Grundy. He's ready to kill Grundy for real this time. But then it's revealed this is not Solomon Grundy. This is actually his uncle Matt. Which was just such a crazy reveal that I was not at all expecting. It makes me wonder, like, then where is Solomon Grundy? Like, was Rick ever actually feeding Solomon Grundy in this season? Well, we saw that happen at the beginning. Did that ever actually happen? maybe not. Like, maybe Grundy still is out there in the woods. Maybe he was feeding him throughout the season, because Eclipso just escaped like 2 episodes ago, and he was feeding him way before that. So it's super confusing, but that's like the whole thing of Eclipso, is that he's going to manipulate your brain using your worst fears against you. But like I said, it was just such a crazy moment. And then what's even crazier is that we get a moment very similar to last week's episode where Yolanda quit being Wildcat, where Rick basically quits being Hourman because he smashes the hourglass on the ground, which was insane because that is the original hourglass, and like the sand falls out and everything. I don't like, how are they going to be able to repair that? That is the original hourglass. I'm really interested to find out how that's going to go, because that was just such a crazy moment. And then after this, he actually ends up getting arrested. So, like I said, I guess his uncle was right in the beginning of the episode, saying he'd go to prison before he ever went to college. So, I mean, that is what's happening, basically. And they mentioned at the end of the episode that Pat and Courtney went to the sheriff's office to see if they could do anything to like bail him out or anything. But yeah, just such a crazy moment, and again, just really interesting, really crazy. But then finally, our final scene of the episode is a nice little moment between Barbara and Mike. Wasn't really a crazy huge moment between the two of them, but the big thing is that at the end of this, it pans to the outside of the house, and you see that the windows are starting to ice up, and that of course is leading into next week's episode, where we are heavily focusing on Icicle. And we actually see, based off the promo, that Icicle, like the original Icicle, Jordan Machen, is returning in a very similar way how we got the return of Brainwave last week, how we got the return of Solomon Grundy this week. So I like seeing the return of some season 1 villains in this season, even if they're dead. So that's going to be really cool, because of course we're progressing Cameron's story forward into becoming Icicle Jr. now that he's unlocked his powers. So I'm really excited to see that. But something I'm a little confused about, though, is that next week we're also supposedly getting the JSA stuff. I did a video on this the other day. We are getting John Wesley Shipp as Jay Garrick the Flash. Of course, he plays Jay Garrick on the Flash Arrowverse series, so it's our first real crossover on Stargirl. So he's going to be appearing in next week's episode. And I thought it was kind of weird that they didn't mention that or show anything from that in the promo at all, because we did get our first official look at Jay Garrick the Flash with the JSA members here, with Starman, with Wildcat, with Hourman, with Pat in that episode. And I did a video breaking that down, so if you haven't already, definitely go check that out. But it sounds like Pat is going to be having some flashbacks to his time with the JSA when the original JSA was taking on and battling Eclipso the original time. So I think that's going to be really cool. But again, it is kind of weird that they never mentioned that in the promo. And I'm also like, it's kind of weird, like, how are they going to squeeze that and all this Icicle stuff in? I don't know. I'm still really excited for it. I think it's going to be absolutely insane, really crazy, but I'm so excited. But guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think about Stargirl Season 2, Episode 8? Let me know all your thoughts, theories, and predictions for the future of Stargirl Season 2 in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching. Please drop a like, give